Welcome to Conversate, our podcast where we engage in conversation. And on this week's episode, Aaron and Kevin are talking about the parable of the Good Samaritan. It's possible, likely, that you've heard that term before, but do you know where it comes from? Who is the Samaritan? What's on his mind and his heart? And what's up with the lawyer who's asking Jesus these questions? There's a lot of biblical information that we're going to share in this conversation that will help bring additional meaning to the conversation. But in the end, the meaning is pretty simple. Have compassion on your neighbors in need. Love them like God first loved you. And so we're going to get there in this conversation as well in some real practical ways. As always, our goal in this conversation is that you'll hear something that we're talking about and go start another conversation with somebody else. As always, we hope you enjoy it. Well, top of the morning.
Hey,
sire.
I guess it is. What is the top of the morning?
I don't know.
I've never really thought about it.
Sunrise?
Well, that would make sense if the euphemism comes from Hebraic origins, because rosh is the word for top or head, but is then used as beginning, right? So like Bereshit, it's from rosh, which is the noun for top or head. So top of the morning, as in the beginning of the morning.
Wow.
So sunrise, if it's of Hebraic origins.
Okay. Or it's 11:59 because we've been climbing our way up the morning, and then we're about to hit noon.
Exactly.
So
that's where my mind went.
Yeah.
My immediate thought was top of the morning would be like noon, basically.
Yeah. I don't think that's what it means.
No, it does seem like the kind of thing you would say at the beginning of the morning versus at the very tail end of it.
Yeah.
Be pretty hard to say it to people, How often are you talking to someone at 11:59?
I don't know. But that's like an Irish thing, right? Top of the morning too. Like
I like to say it with an Irish accent.
Yeah. It's definitely it's in honor of our week late St. Patrick's Day storm.
How yes. About that? Wow, I hadn't thought of that. People were talking about, or someone else had referred to our Ash Wednesday storm as the early St. Patty's Day storm. Yeah. But we've just been stormed again.
Yeah, we got one before and after.
Bookended it.
There you go.
It's a St. Patty's Day storm sandwich.
Even better.
Sounds delicious.
Wow. A little corned beef.
That's right. A little
some
snow. It's like my kids eat maple syrup on snow.
Oh, it's so good.
Just eat corned beef on snow.
Yeah. That was in a book. We got a book from the library about making syrup. And I don't know if it's based on a true story, but in the story, it's these kids hanging out with grandpa and grandma in the shack,
sugar shack.
Yeah. And then at the end, the grandpa drizzles syrup all over the snow, and then they pick it up and eat it.
Yeah. Lily loves it, man. Yeah. She was so psyched when it snowed. Yeah. It's like, I can have that again?
Yeah.
Like, yep.
Yeah, we did it this summer. It's this summer. Winter's so long, it's starting to feel like summer.
Packaged it up, threw it in the freezer. That'll be good. A few months, a little taste of winter.
I did just tell Marcus this morning that for VBS, a little spoiler there, but Vacation Bible School this summer is going to be like Alaskan themed, like log house and trees and stuff. I was like, oh, wow, like our backyard, I said we should go scoop up a whole bunch of snowballs and put them in the freezer and have a snowball fight at VBS this summer.
That would be honestly fantastic.
I know. I've never tried that though.
Yeah, like how does it? What kind of consistency?
It'll just turn to ice.
Probably it's moisture and it's going to be freezing.
Yeah, it'll just turn into a hard ball.
That's what they do already, right? Like when you have trying to have a snowball fight like 5 days after you had a good snow, it's just hard. You're just throwing ice chunks at each other. Yeah.
That would hurt.
Yeah, that probably wouldn't be as good as we imagine.
Well, in theory.
Yeah. Oh, little teaser for you though. That's nice. Yeah. That's that we don't drip that kind of information.
People think we just are flying by the seat of our pants around here. Look at all this forethought we're doing.
That's right. Hey. And you're the privileged folks to know about this Alaskan. I hope one of the snacks is, you ever get Alaskan pancakes?
No, what's that?
I swear it's like whipped cream and chocolate sauce. I got the sweats once at a restaurant on a date with Molly. I broke out in a hot flash.
In Alaska?
No, you can order these anywhere. That's the beauty. But they're called, I don't know why they're called Alaskan pancakes.
Because you would need all that fat to survive the winter.
I guess. Huh. Yeah. It's because it gets you sweaty, and then you're good because you're so cold.
Yeah. One time in college, I had an experience like that.
Yeah.
We should probably limit our college stories, but
sure. This is your token one for today.
It was when I think it was Monster energy drinks. So this is there's energy drinks all over the place now. This was energy drinks were a new thing.
The advent of,
and so there was a demo that came to our campus and was passing out free ones. And we got a free drink during the day. And then they said, if you come back at the end of the day, anything that we have left, we'll give you a bunch. So we went back with a duffel bag and filled it up. And I drank 10 of them in a row. Man. And then I had to go sit at this concert. We had friends that were performing for some concert, and I was just there. And I was just shaking and sweating the whole time. And then I went back to my dorm room and I fell asleep.
Did you sleep for a long time?
I don't know. I think, but it had the opposite effect of
giving you energy.
Yeah, I just felt horrible and then fell asleep.
Just totally stress the system.
Yeah, I don't think you're supposed to do that.
No, definitely not. Yeah. In fact, I think there was at the time, like you're talking, and I forget that energy drinks are somewhat of a novelty. They're not all that old. But yeah, I think there was concerns on various college campuses for. I think there were even fatalities, if I'm not mistaken, because of some overconsumption of energy drinks. Yeah. Glad it didn't happen to you, buddy.
Yeah, I made it through. I haven't touched one since.
A big nap. Yeah, they used to when I was in high school, I was part of the drum line, and it's one of the traditions. I'm not sure when it started. It couldn't have been that old, but was to drink a bunch of energy drinks before our band performances, during the football games. Thankfully, I never participated because it also, another tradition was to eat a ton of go to Fazoli's and eat a bunch of Italian food. That was not a great combination, I can tell you. No. Based on my friends' experiences. Yeah. I had a delightful time.
You're telling me you made wise choices in life?
Can you believe that? Well, I mean, I'm more tired now as a parent, obviously. Back in the high school days, I didn't dream of needing energy. I had a lot of energy.
I bet you did.
Yeah. Still kind of do.
Yeah. Good stuff. Hey, it's been a fun journey going through Luke this Lent, and in the readings this last week, there's this. I don't know if you noticed it. I noticed when we were watching the movie that this. I've heard it before, but this line that shows up that Jesus set his face to head towards Jerusalem.
Yeah, I love that line.
And now I know it's Luke chapter 9, verse 51, where it shows up the very first time. And so it's this kind of transitional point in the gospel where Jesus is now traveling to Jerusalem. Nothing's going to stop him. I mean, at the beginning of Luke, he's been, healing, doing miracles, calling the disciples, giving them some experiences, and much more of that kind of stuff is going to still happen. He's still going to teach and do miracles and all that kind of stuff. But now he's resolute. It's happening. Time has come. He's heading to Jerusalem.
Yeah, it's kind of like the picture I get, or the image is in any hero story when they look upon the fortress of the enemy they're trying to conquer, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Pants. You see Aragorn just stone cold looking at Mordor.
Yeah, it's still out there. There's still some stuff that's got to happen.
That's right.
But
there it is.
Yeah.
Here I come. Yeah. And interestingly, I think in that section there in Luke, right, this actually offends some of the Samaritans, I believe.
Yeah. It's that same section, because then
he's in Samaritan territory. I think.
He sent some people ahead of him into the different villages, but because he has his face set towards Jerusalem, the Samaritans don't receive him, and that's when James and John want to call down fire upon them.
Which all kind of ties in a little more contextual piece to what you preached on Sunday, which was the parable of the Good Samaritan, and as a part of that telling, you gave us a lot of context actually to help understand why there some of the force of that parable. But because like, what's a Samaritan?
Right.
What is Jericho? Where is it in relation to Jerusalem? Who are Levites? There's a lot of questions or a lot of terms in that particular parable that just aren't common for us.
Yeah. We can dive into some of that if we want. Because there's even more context we can talk about with like Samaria and the Samaritans and where all that comes from historically, if that's interesting. But I also made a claim, and I'm just curious of your experience, like that this parable could be one of the better known ones, or at least like by title. I don't know. Do you like? I hear that term thrown around like on the news if some stranger comes along and does something nice for somebody out of the blue. Like a lot of times they'll call that person a Good Samaritan.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I mean, thinking about it from that standpoint, it might be the most popular parable. Like I would agree with your proposition pretty strongly, because like even the other popular parables that come to my mind would be like the parable of the sower, right? But you don't hear newscasters talking about anyone sowing, right?
I think maybe the prodigal son might be up there.
That's probably fair. And again, even that term prodigal, like that doesn't get, people really don't know the meaning of prodigal. I didn't know the meaning of prodigal. It doesn't mean like someone who's like, cast off or far off. It means extravagant, actually. But yes, that idea of like kind of the forlorn son or the rejected, the prodigal son
has returned.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that probably would be the rival, I would say.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's tons of other parables that people would have no idea what you're talking about if you referenced it,
For sure.
Yeah. But you made that point as well, even with the term Good Samaritan, that doesn't necessarily mean that someone using the term is familiar of one, where it comes from, or two, any of the details of this parable.
Right. It's just generally like when somebody does something nice for another person, maybe out of the blue,
That is really interesting, though.
But there are, I didn't look this up, but I know there are like Good Samaritan laws as well.
Yeah.
Which is like is that with like, it might be like if you're trying to do like CPR on somebody or something, and
there's protection for the liability, because of your like good intent.
Yeah.
Then I was just gonna say, like, it's kind of astounding, actually, considering the context, which whether we get into it or not, but like this is a term that's referencing a very particular people group from the Middle East that they got this name from. In the BCs, 600, 700, 800 BC, that's wild that still is in common parlance. That is wild.
I know.
Like there's not many, like we were talking about, it's kind of interesting full circle, like at the beginning of this podcast, talking about top of the morning. Maybe there's some Hebraic connection, but that's pretty unlikely. Like Hebrew's not a romance language, like a lot of the other languages that have impacted, are the kind of things we say. But every now and then you find one. So that one, I mean, for all I know, it could be. But that's just astounding that idea has carried forward for thousands of years. That's pretty wild.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, for those who might not hear the sermon, or that are, again, listening to this in the year 3012 or whatever.
Yeah. You guys are still using the word Good Samaritan, right?
I bet they are.
They are, for sure. That's timeless.
Yeah. They're probably saying it in Chinese, though.
Sorry. Never mind.
I don't know.
What do you know that I don't?
I don't know. So I'll just kind of do this quickly again. But so Samaria is a region in Israel. If you're looking at a map of Israel, Jerusalem, where Jerusalem is the region of Judea, and then Samaria is right above that, and then right above that would be Galilee, and so there are all these different regions. Those northern regions, I can't remember when they got their name. Was that when they after the Assyrians? That would see. I'm getting into something that I don't know the answer to.
Well, so
because there were the different tribes.
I think it's a helpful place to start. So for the community of Israel, these chosen people of God, there's 12 sons, if we want to back up that far, who are born to Jacob.
Yeah.
Those same sons become the leaders, the tribal leaders, if you will, who are given plots of land in the same area we're talking about.
Yep.
So Judea, Samaria, those were broken into, 11, I guess.
11, because the Levites did not get a piece of land. Their inheritance was the temple.
But actually, it is still broken into 12 because Joseph doesn't get one piece of land as this is the odd economy of God's, dealings, right? Joseph was, I guess he was the firstborn of Jacob by the wife he loved, but Joseph gets a double portion. So the two tribes are Manasseh and Ephraim. Those are Joseph's two sons. Right. Interestingly, I believe by an Egyptian wife. Talk about non-purity, from a Jewish standpoint. Yeah. That's neither here nor there.
So a little Bible history. So there's all these there's these different plots of land that the Israelites are living in, and then eventually there's one united kingdom under David and Solomon, and then after Solomon, with his son, then the kingdom of Israel becomes divided into two: a northern kingdom of Israel and a southern kingdom of Israel. The northern kingdom is all of the tribes except for Judea
and Judah and Benjamin.
Ah, yes.
So Benjamin is like a small tribe, though. It's kind of like a no-name tribe. This is why Saul, who's the first king, he's from the tribe of Benjamin, and he's like, "What? I'm being picked? Like I'm from the I'm the lowest dude in my family's clan in the lowest tribe of Israel." That's and again, this is God going counter the ways of the world. He doesn't just choose the strong, the mighty. He chooses the lowly, exalts the lowly. But Benjamin, you don't even hear about it as the Old Testament progresses because it basically gets lumped into with Judah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then the northern kingdom, these 10 or 11 other tribes, they're eventually conquered by the Assyrians. This is before the southern kingdom falls to the Babylonians. But the northern kingdom falls to the Assyrians, and part of that way of ruling that the Assyrians did was that they would, take people out of their land and bring others in and mix them all up so that there's no pure lineage anymore. And so the people living in the land of what was the northern kingdom of Israel become this mixed race ethnically of Jewish and foreigners. And then, so ethnically, but then also religiously in their practice, they set up shop to worship Yahweh, not in Jerusalem, but in Shechem on Mount Gerizim. And they have their own version of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. And so there's this region of Samaria just north of Judea by the time of Jesus. And that southern kingdom, I guess, of Judah, they were eventually taken over by the Babylonians, cast out into exile for 70 years. That's where we get the stories of Daniel and those guys.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Yeah, later Esther as well.
Mm-hmm. Ezekiel.
Yeah, and then Ezra and Nehemiah bring the exiles back, and they resettle the southern kingdom. They rebuild Jerusalem. They rebuild the temple. And so this southern kingdom is kind of the pure line of the Jews as much as they can, who have decided not to intermarry with one another or with other nations.
And to be fair, they still had problems.
They do still have problems, but
even on that note, and they get chastised for it, and then they get chastised for what they do.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm getting into the weeds here.
We did a sermon series on Ezra and Nehemiah.
That's right.
Go back and look. It all ends with this whole thing about intermarrying. Anyway.
Yeah.
So by the time of Jesus, though, the Pharisees and these guys in the southern kingdom kind of feel like they are the
ones, the elect, the chosen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're doing it. They've got the temple. They've got the sacrificial system. They've got the law of Moses. They're doing it. Those Samaritans, they're half-breeds, they're doing their own thing. And so the Samaritans feel the same about the Jews though too.
Yeah, there's right.
The feelings are kind of mutual.
Right.
They hate each other.
Yes. And just to clarify again, so the Jews, this is the same people group who have not intermarried over the course of all of these centuries. The Samaritans had been part of that same Jewish family, but now get the name Samaritans simply geographically, because they were the people connected to Samaria, which was, I believe, the capital of Ephraim. So Samaria was part of
It is a city, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So Samaria, it's in Samaritan, it just comes from Samaria as a name, which is just connecting them to that region. You guys were part of the northern kingdom that betrayed the southern kingdom, where Jerusalem is, where God has always dwelled. And to be fair, too, to the Pharisees and anyone who belonged to the southern kingdom, I mean, you think about their history just as a people, they really did get tested through fire in terms of having ample opportunity to forsake their faith, whether in Babylon, whether back when they settle and there's other people groups coming in and trying to, defile them, if you will, even down to the intertestamental period. So like the 400 BC up to the time of Jesus, when Greek rulers are coming in and doing the same sort of defiling. And this is when the Maccabees rise up and overthrow those forces. So like there's been a lot of history where this particular group has fought, I mean, really tooth and nail, not to forsake what had been given them from God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just to kind of create a little bit of empathy, let's say, for even the Pharisaical community. Like sometimes we see them only as like, you guys are enemies of Jesus, and all you care about is religious rigor. It's like, well, it kind of makes sense why they would. Like they've been fighting, right, not to lose this identity.
Well, and Moses had instructed them, like shows up in the parable of the Good Samaritan with the law of God.
Yes.
Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Teach these things to your children.
Right.
Keep the commands of God. Like God's word says that. That's what the Old Testament says. Like,
that's right.
Follow these commands. Follow these rules. So they're trying.
There's a real zeal for doing this, and to the point even of like between let's say the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom, between the Jews versus the Samaritans, who was right? To some degree, actually, you could make a case for the southern kingdom, for the Pharisees. Jesus himself, when he's dealing with the woman at the well, will say, and she's a Samaritan, he'll say, you worship what you do not know, but we worship who we do know, right? So Jesus even, seems to suggest, like Jesus doesn't say like, hey, it doesn't matter how you worship. Hey, everyone's fine. Everyone's right. No, not at all. Jesus is like clear. There actually is an objective truth. But then, of course, Jesus is going to go on to talk about who that's available to. And that's kind of the big Pharisaical problem, was thinking it's only for us.
Yeah. And Luke's gospel in particular draws out the reality that Jesus came for all people, Jew and Gentile alike. This story goes back to the beginning of Luke, when shepherds are being called to come and, see Jesus. And just a point, just a little bit more on the Samaritan deal. So if you can picture it, on the far southern chunk is Judea, the region where Jerusalem and Jericho are. Samaria is right above that. And then above that is Galilee, where like Nazareth and Capernaum. And so where Jesus is born and where the disciples live. And that's kind of more Jewish territory as well.
Interesting.
Not really Samaritan territory.
Yeah.
So
they're kind of sandwiched in between these two.
Yeah. So
okay.
When Jews like from Galilee would need to travel to Jerusalem for different festivals and things, there were a couple of different routes that they would go. Some would choose to travel on a Mediterranean route, so they would kind of head out around Samaria to the west and follow the Mediterranean Sea down to Jerusalem. Some would head over to the Jordan River Valley on the east and follow that into Jerusalem. But then there was the straightest shot was just to go through Samaria, and you could, and some Jews chose to do that, but it was a little bit more dangerous.
Yeah. Enemy territory, if you will.
Yeah. But some people chose to do that, and Jesus actually chose to do that most often. And that's what we're seeing happen here. So Jesus has gone through, he's gone through Samaria. That's back to that point about like, it's right before he tells the parable of the Good Samaritan, where James and John are wanting to call down fire upon Samaritans because he's heading to Jerusalem. Right after, really soon after that, and here in Luke chapter 10, he's telling the parable of the Good Samaritan.
So he's just been, this is interesting. So Jesus, he's got his face set towards Jerusalem. And again, kind of going back to his conversation with the woman at the well, like this sort of shows, even Jesus will talk this way, right? First for the Jew, then for the Gentile. Like in some ways, Jesus was sent, like specifically in sort of a priority fashion, in a sense, to this, if you will, the southern kingdom, right? To that people group. And yet he's willing to listen to engage with, I had not realized that, like Jesus' own kind of pathway, like where he travels in his ministry, like he's going to go through Samaritan territory and he's not going to be anti-Samaritan in those travels, and obviously in his speaking. But then his two disciples are going to demonstrate for you what we've been talking about. Like their actions demonstrate for you that history of intolerance, really, between these two people groups. You know, they say they do some very small slight against Jesus. It's not even that they say something negative to Jesus. They're just offended that Jesus, is heading to Jerusalem, and they're like, let's kill these guys. Jesus, should we blast them? So that shows you right there just the level of intensity, I suppose, between the two. But here's Jesus toting what is just an infinitesimal line, between these relationships, right?
Yeah.
So
that's all that context is super, I think personally helpful to just flesh out the meaning of what's going on here. Again, in the story of the parable of the Good Samaritan, there's a guy who Jesus is telling the story again of a man who's beaten by robbers, left half dead, a priest who and then a Levite, who are both religious leaders, pass by. They don't help him. But then a Samaritan sees the man in need, goes to him, has compassion on him, binds up his wounds, picks him up, puts him on his own animal, brings him to an inn, spends the night with him, tending to him, pays 2 days of worth of money to the innkeeper, and says, I'll come back and check. And if you need more money to care for him longer, I'll pay the bill. So in all of that, again, like Jesus is basically making the point to a Pharisee, to this kind of religious leader, to this lawyer who's trying to self-justify his own actions and kind of claiming that he's keeping the law of God
pretty well.
Good enough. And Jesus is kind of speaking to his heart, where it's like, are you though? Or are you passing by? This Samaritan actually is the one who has mercy.
Right.
Compassion. I think tying this in like practically to our lives is important as well. I mentioned this in the sermon a little bit, and I've just had this experience a lot lately where like I feel like there's a lot of anger and hostility among different like people groups in our society. Sometimes that's down political lines. I think, unfortunately, a lot of times, and then there's like subgroups within those political lines, and unfortunately, I've even heard like good, well-meaning Christian people like talk about other people with quite a bit of anger at others, with quite a bit of self-justification themselves. Sort of like, who do these people think they are? When, I believe in Jesus, I'm going to church. I mean, nobody's ever said it that explicitly, but sort of like, we've got it together. Who do they think they are? And that makes me so mad that they would be like that. So that's, a little bit of like Jewish Samaritan, hostilities.
That's right. We have the tendency, and this what that particular history shows us, and even what experience tells us, is that humankind has this natural capacity, natural tendency to associate yourself with others who think like you, look like you, belong to whatever group like you, and then vilify those who, because of either how they look or what they belong to or what they do, seem antithetical to you. Yeah. And so that vilification is like, there's nothing good in you. And that's what's so striking about Jesus' parable, is here he is talking to the Jews, and in the parable, the hero of the story is the person who belongs to the other group. And like you said, the guy is forced to, at the end of the parable, basically say like, yeah, he was the hero, and so Jesus is doing a number of things in this parable, even talking to like our, capacity to, let's say, overlook those who are in need, because we've got some, for whatever reason that is, we overlook them. But one thing for sure Jesus is doing is he's saying, watch out for that tendency in your heart, and don't believe it, because it's wrong. So yeah, if you're a Democrat, to think that there's nothing good in the Republican Party or people who call themselves Republican, or to imagine that all of the problems are because of the Republicans. Jesus is saying to you, watch out. And that's also not true. The same would be said if you are Republican and you think that way about the Democrats. Same is true. I think there's a growing sensitivity towards different races, but I've still encountered it. It caught me off guard, because I think I've grown up in a time when there is enough cultural sensitivity or racial sensitivity that you wouldn't expect to encounter it. But I encountered it at an auto shop in Detroit, where the operator, just outright said the issues that our area is seeing is because of this demographic, this race. They are the problem. If we could get rid of them, things would be better. Jesus is saying to him, watch out. Watch out for that tendency in your heart, which is not of God, and it's not true. There's like, it's not always racial or ethnic like it was for the Jews and the Samaritans, but we all do have a tendency. We all have a tendency, humanly, to do this, depending on what groups we belong to and what those antithetical groups belong to.
Yeah, and it's not only the tendency to look down on others, but to
prop up
ourselves, our group, and to think that we're at least pretty good. So that's for sure the tendency. And then I think what the move that Jesus is calling us to make is then, what is our heart towards other people? It can't be one of anger and hostility. It must be one of compassion. And so that's what the Samaritan has. That's what he feels. He sees the hurt man and he has compassion. He's deeply moved in his core. And I said this in my sermon, and I don't do this perfectly, but I have tried to intentionally pray this prayer. Like if I'm feeling angry at someone, like, well, that anger towards that person or these people, and it's often like people that I don't even know. It's like an aura about a group or whatever. It's like, well, that's not of God.
Yeah.
But and especially, like, I was trying to make this point too, like, especially if they're apart from Jesus, if they're doing things that are not of God and are against God, but they're not Christian, they don't believe in Jesus. Well, I shouldn't expect them to act like Christian people if they're not Christian people.
Yeah. Why would I have that expectation?
And so my heart should actually break for them. I should be moved in compassion for them, not in anger. Like, what do you think you're doing? But like, man, you don't know Jesus. Like, and that just that move, that I mean, if your gut is changed in compassion, that's supposed to also then change your actions towards them, not just this feeling you have, but actually the way that you would move forward in relation with them. So I think that's a worthy prayer to pray, something to think about, like a little trigger to be wary of, like
if you find yourself doing it, if you find yourself vilifying some group or some people, or even just having that emotional response when something happens, stop. Jesus said, pray for your enemies. I mean, you can be honest, like, these people are my enemies. You don't even have to say, like, no, they're my friends. Like, you can say, no, they're my enemies. Jesus still says pray, go to God in prayer. The purpose is always to ultimately bring people into the truth, into the fold of God. If there's something that objectively is going against God's will, what he would want for humanity, like, it's okay to experience anger, because God, there's lots of things that God is angry about, like, does not want his humankind to be doing to each other. But it's not retaliation that's going to solve that. It's not vilifying that's going to resolve that. The only power actually that's going to make it a real change would be the power of God. And how does that get expressed? Through his people.
So you ask for the Holy Spirit to come upon you, and I mean, that's Luke chapter 11 as well, that God knows how to give his people the Holy Spirit, as because he's a good, loving Father. And so pray for the Spirit to come upon your life and transform you to have the heart of God for your neighbors, for all people, right? And so
it's a good word, man.
Yeah, it's I love this parable, and it was fun to preach through and do a little bit in a different kind of way. But so for all of you, go and do likewise.
Yeah, be a good Samaritan.
There you go. All right. Peace, bud.
Peace.